see 5 screens. Void screens will disappear.
Well, we'll be able to see them, but they won't appear on the recording. We'll take them out when he records them.
Oh, by the way, I have a question to Boyd. Please, Boyd, remind me to ask it. I forgot to ask it. Now, this has nothing to do with our presentation. With the way Zoom is operating.
Okay, I'm trying to get my screen here ready. I'm just getting my screen ready to share it. Share right now. Got something very strange going on here. Where is it? This will just give me. Yeah. Everyone, we've got to wait a few seconds for the system to add everybody to it. So we have to wait a little bit for the number of participants to. I'm watching the number of participants, and they're still increasing. So we'll wait until that stabilizes, and then we'll get started. Welcome everyone to the Wilmot Institute's web talk for the 29th of March, 2020. And today we will hear from Alexander Chumakov in Russia, interviewed by Dr. Mikhail Sergeyev in Philadelphia, talking about globalization and its discontent. But first, let me say a few things about the Wilmot Institute, just for background, in case people don't know what we are. The Wilmot Institute is now 25 years old, established in 1995 by the National Spiritual Assembly of the Bahá'ís of the United States. We ran a face-to-face program for a while and then started doing in 1998 during that face-to-face program, which proved much more popular in many ways. And we've now had 584 courses and 14,700 registrations. Get rid of that so that's right. So we have quite a few people who've taken our courses over these 2 decades plus. 127 countries have been the locations of our students, and the students, as a result of these courses, have been able to give all kinds of presentations to classes, different kinds of meetings. They've spoken on the radio, they've spoken before all kinds of audiences about the materials that they learned. We now have these web talks. They were started in 2015, so this is actually our 6th year doing the web talks, and we're working on other kinds of publications, symposia as well. And we're working on being accredited so that we can actually offer courses for credit. We'll see how quickly we'll be able to do that. I should mention very quickly, we have several upcoming web talks. A week from today, Sunday, the 5th of April, Angelina Allen will be talking about John Bosch, who was one of the first Baha'is in California. He became a Baha'i around 1900 or so. That should be quite an interesting talk. She's just published a book about him. And then on Sunday, April the 12th, Arthur Lyendahl, Maya Groff, and Augusto Lopez Claros have just published a book, Global Governance and the Emergence of Global Institutions for the 21st Century. And this particular book is just came out in February. They won a $1 million prize to work on this book and to make a global tour promoting it, which I suspect they can't do now. So that's also coming along. And then in May, Boris Handel will be speaking about Baha'u'llah's youngest son, Mirza Mehdi, who, of course, died when he was 17 years old. Boris has published a book about Mirza Mehdi, the purest branch, and we'll have that talk on May the 3rd. We also have some courses coming up, and Fostering a Baha'i Identity in Families starts on the 30th. So does Foundations for Relationships, which is a course for young adults up to age 30. An Interfaith Dialogue course starts on April the 2nd, Climate Change on April the 9th, and then a course on Abdu'l-Bahá's Life and Ministry on April the 30th. So we have quite a few things coming, and this doesn't even include our Tuesday evening webinars, which we're starting this week with a talk about climate change. And we're also going to be starting a Wednesday evening program with Rainn Wilson, a well-known actor. Turning now, however, to the topic of the day, I want to introduce Professor Alexander Chumakov briefly. Michal will flesh out this in addition. He is a Russian philosopher, theoretician of science, a scientific community organizer, and a specialist in the fields of philosophy and in the theory of globalization, which of course is the topic today we're particularly interested in. He has been since 1990 a leading research fellow and the head of the group of global studies at the Institute of the Russian Academy of Sciences, became a full professor in 1993, and since 2008 has worked as a professor of the Department of Global Processes at Moscow State University. He currently teaches several specialized courses at the university, including a course entitled Global Studies, and he's authored more than 600 scholarly publications, 20 monographs, and textbooks. Thank you so much, Professor Chumakov, for joining us. I believe, I know I've been to Moscow State University in 1992 or 91, 92.
So many changing after the time.
Yeah, back in the days when about 1/3 of the fluorescent light fixtures in the ceilings had lights.
Yeah.
2/3 of them didn't have any. That was a very difficult time. And it seems to me, I don't think I went to the Russian Academy of Sciences. Is that over by the Pushkin Museum? I went to something over there and met some of the people there who studied. Originally, they were the Department of Atheism, and then they became the Department of Science, it seems to me. I met a bunch of people there. I'm trying to remember the name of the lady. Stepanians, was that her name? She was
Marietta Stepanians.
Yes. Yes, I met her. She was the chair of that group, I believe, and then later came to the University of Hawaii.
Yeah, and she's a specialist in Orient philosophies.
Yes, she was a nice lady. I remember.
Russian Academy of Science Institute philosophy is the same.
Yeah, so I enjoyed my visit to Moscow. It was not too cold then. It was not 16 degrees Celsius like it is today.
Okay, welcome next time.
Yes, indeed. I should also introduce Mikhail Sergeyev very quickly, professor of philosophy at the University of the Arts in Philadelphia, of course, Russian origin, a U.S. citizen, and I assume still also a Russian citizen as well, who is the co-chair of the Wilmot Institute's Department of Religion, Philosophy, and Theology. So I will now turn off my camera and microphone. I will leave it to the two of you to continue this discussion, and I will listen quite eagerly to what you have to say. Thank you, both of you, for joining us today. Really, we're very grateful.
Thank you, the same.
Thank you, Robert. All right. So thank you, Robert, for this kind introduction. We now will begin our discussion about globalization. I know Alexander for many, many years, and each time we are talking over Skype, we are discussing the problems of globalization in some way or another. So there are too many things to discuss here, but I would focus on some specific questions, key questions, that will give our audience a general sense of where Russian research on globalization is going. So my first question, Alexander, is this. Is globalization, in your view, an objective, which means independent of human intentions, an objective process, and a necessary step in human evolution, or is it a subjective tendency that depends on the inclinations and efforts of a certain segment of human population?
Thank you, Professor Sergeyev, and also I'd like to have such conversation with you because we are talked about a lot about this globalization, global issues is a lot of, and you give me a very important question because how you understand globalization, it will be determining your practice. What will you do after that in your practice. And of course, I'd like to say it from first step that globalization, it is objective historical process, first of all. First of all, because subjects also influence of global processes, but we must understand what kind of subjects we are talking about. Of course, if we will speak about globalization, we must say about such subject as national states, international company, international organization, like subjects who has deal in global scale in relations and so on and so on. That is why when we say that globalization is objective processes, we keep in mind subjects, but first of all, we must understand that globalization, this is not a project, this is of someone, this is not a mistake of maybe politics of some of states or someone else. This is a historical process, and I hope today we will see more careful how it's happened, globalization, when and why it was starting, and in what level, on what steps stay we now in global relations and so
on. I see. Well, since you call me professor, I have to call you professor as well.
Okay. It's Alexander Mikhail.
No. Equality.
Okay.
Professor Chumakov.
Yeah.
Many believe that globalization is a recent phenomenon, that it started after the collapse of the Soviet Union and the invention of the internet. What is your opinion on this issue?
You know, it's a well spread opinion, but it is a wrong opinion. I must say, because if we ask ourselves who are those people who speak that globalization starting maybe in 20th century, and maybe 1-2 centuries before, I will say that this is persons who not enough deep understand what's happened in global scale, not now, not only now, but in previously time. And that is why I'd like to remember you, we talk with you, and I'd like to say our audience that before globalization, we had area of regionalization, and before that, localization. And it is simple to understand if we will look to the history of humanity. And humankind started his life on this earth, planet, our earth, maybe 60,000 years, thousands years before. It was like humanity, you know, this is a local community. It was a small community which was different in different parts of our earth and not communicate between each of them. And till maybe ancient time, maybe 5,000-7,000 years ago, starting region area of regionalization. We can say that from Alexander Great, this epoch of regionalization relationship communications, and structure is the same. And this area of regionalization was continuing till the great geographical discoveries. Why? Because till this time, in different parts of our planet, in Europe, for example, in Australia, in America, also were populations, peoples, but they not communicated. They didn't know nothing, about each other before 1492, when Columbus discovered America. And this is a point from what we can say about global processes. In global processes in society, because when we say about global processes in society, we call such processes globalization. But if we look for global processes outside of societies, we can say that we have the same global processes in nature, in biosphere, in hydrosphere, in atmosphere, global processes. It is more older processes, but when such processes involve in was embrace humanity, and was first steps, of course. And this is discoveries of America, of Columbus, is a point from which we can say about globalization. I call such globalization real globalization. Before, we cannot speak. We can't speak about global process, globalization, and so on and so on. It is a mistake. And from this time, real globalization. And till this 19th century, this globalization starting more and more hard. More and more countries was involved in these processes. Economy, culture, politics, of course, and other different spheres of social life was involved more and more hard to global relationship communications and starting more and more structures. In middle, till this middle of 19th century, these processes grow up till such situation when we can say this is a fundamental globalization. Why I call this globalization fundamental? Because two fundamental spheres of social life, economy and politics, was involved in very much in global processes. From middle of 19th century, we can see many international companies. From this time, starting creation international organization like Red Cross, like Manifest Communist Party. It's the same Marx and Engels was persons who says workers around the world unite around the world. It is the first manifest who was said about one part, but all humanity, workers. And this area especially was shows its face in the first global war. First global war, it was as a, what is a war? It's a politics, but only with a hard power. And this fundamental spheres, economy and politics, give us possibility to say about fundamental globalization. And after till this middle 20th century, we had many different changes in our life, and you remember, our audience also know that in 1957 was first satellite was we had in the Soviet Union, and people and man came to the space. At this time was established, was created nuclear bomb, and the Second World War finished. This is another point of our turn point, because in the second part of the 20th century was starting technological computer revolution, and all of these events give us possibilities, the reasons to say about multi-aspect globalization. Multi-aspect globalization because all spheres of our life was involved in global study. That is why I say about 3 steps: real, fundamental, and multi-aspect globalization. And now we live in multi-aspect globalization because not only economy, not only politics, on the same environmental problems, information sphere, sports, culture, language, and so on and so on, starting to be like a global phenomenon.
Okay. So thank you. I understand that according to your views, globalization started well before the 19th century, back in the 15th century, and it was accelerating and acquiring different dimensions.
Yeah.
I also read your book, The Metaphysics of Globalization, in which you were trying to
This one.
Yes, exactly. Yes. In which you were trying to lay down the philosophical foundations for your studies of globalization. You study the processes of globalization through the conceptual lenses of 2 interrelated ideas of culture and civilization. So my next question is, what is, in your view, the correlation between culture, civilization, and globalization?
Yeah, it is a very important question because we talk not only about global processes, but about global processes in society, because there are so many other global processes like in atmosphere, hydrosphere, and the biosphere, etc. That is why if we will talk about society, what is the differences between 3 spheres of the nature, biosphere, and social societies? And societies, the main characteristics is culture. Civilization, it is another term which is very important in this conversation, but unfortunately, not so many people enough well develop these terms, culture and civilization. Some of them say that this culture and civilization is similar, the same. Some says it's differences. But I'd like to suggest you to look to the culture and civilization like for 2 characteristics of social life, inside and outside. Outside. Culture like inside characteristics, because culture, it is first of all 3 roots, 3 legs has in different societies. First of all, language. The second, traditions. And the third, beliefs. Our religions is like, it's not only religion, but beliefs. If we will combine all these three legs, but it's not all of the roots of cultures, but it is the main. If we will put all of them and says, what is the Russians? What is the Chinese? What is Americans? Maybe it's France, Germany's. We will see that we have different cultures. Different because different languages, traditions, religions, and so on and so on. And that is why culture was, now is, and will always different. Professor, we will, with you, belong to Russian culture. But if we will compare our understanding of this war, we will see that language is the same, but beliefs may be different. I know there's some differences. And traditions, yes and no differences. But it's the same, me and my wife, you and your wife also. But when we will talk about Russian, French, Germany, like a country, and Chinese, India, we will see that all cultures, diverse people, diverse societies. But we communicate, we understand each other very well. Why? Because we have also a level, enough level civilization. Civilized, we're civilized enough well. What is civilized? Civilization, this is the new, it's the 17th, 18th centuries in France, and Enlightenment epoch was creating this term. And what is me? It is mean that we will communicate with you more gently, more politely, understanding each other more better, and appreciate your rights. I appreciate your rights, but please appreciate my rights too. This is a civilized. This is also culture, but culture relationship, culture understanding each other. That is why I said that culture and civilization, this is two parts of one things, society is the system. And you ask me, what about globalization? I will say that globalization happens in culture and civilization spheres. And embrace culture and globalization, our globalization level, it depends very much from globalization. Globalization depends from culture. That is why we must say, first of all, about what's happened in culture, in global processes, what's happened in civilizations when we looking from the global point of view. And that is why I suggest to say not only about a culture, this or this one or that one or another one, societies, maybe a country, but I suggest to say about cultural civilization system. Cultural civilization systems is closely cultural civilization system, and then we will understand better what is Russia. Russia, has own culture and common civilization principle norms. What is Americans? Also many cultures, but similar culture in the United States, but also the same similar civilized norms and rules and so on and so on. The same in Europe, in China, in India. And so that is why we can say about global civilization. We can also say about global culture. But it is please will put this, will not spread about this topic, but will return to globalization. Globalization influenced very much to culture, our life in culture, because our language, our tradition, and our beliefs clash with others, with different, different others cultures, and only if we have enough good level of civilization, education give us civilization, more and more level civilization, we will understand better each other, more better than more high level of common civilization level we will have. And globalization bring us more closely in a time, in our relationship, like now, you're in America, I'm in Moscow now, and our listening different parts of our earth. And it's our culture, different culture, but in civilization, we and similar, because we appreciate our human rights, our norms, and so on.
Well, first of all, I'm sorry for the calls. This is my mother from Moscow, and very difficult.
Globalization.
It's very difficult not to answer, but I won't. And I said in Skype that please do not disturb, but mom is always here. Look, I understand, Professor, your view on globalization and civilization. You are talking in your book about a structure of globalization / civilization. You are trying not to divide them, and you think that this is a complex that includes both parts. Culture is something that comes from inside. Civilization is the result of the outside relationship in the society. And I remember that we talked a lot about this topic, and we actually disagreed here, which goes first, culture or civilization. But let me ask you in this respect about some maybe negative aspects of globalization. Does globalization pose a threat to cultural diversity and to cultural uniqueness by equalizing cultural differences and promoting the so-called global mass culture?
You know, of course, globalization changed a lot of in culture. And for example, mass culture, you mentioned now about that one. It is, of course, results of globalization. Before globalization, we had not mass cultures, but it is good or not mass cultures. Good and and not good, the same, because when we have many things around us, the same things, like this book, maybe. I have this book, the same book you have. I have this pen, you have the same pen, and so on and so on. My glasses and your glasses is similar. It is a mass culture. It is bad or no? It's good. It's good because it's more simple, more cheaper, and so on and so on and so on. But when we will speak, we will talk about high level of culture, maybe like painting, maybe songs, and so on and so on. It is very important in our life, because mass culture for all of us, but maybe painting some painting artists, like maybe some pictures, maybe like abstractionism, maybe, for example, not for all, understandable, and literature and poetry and so on and so on and so on. What's happened in globalization with cultures? Of course, national cultures clash with common, with a global culture, with a mass cultures. These objective processes. And for example, languages. This is also part of culture. And we can see that small populations of some small nations lose their native language. It is, of course, a big problem, and they must save their language, but they cannot use this language when they communicate with their business in with different countries and companies and so on and so on. That is why let's remember that was in previously time was many languages, like main languages, Latin language was in ancient time. Then was French language, like diplomatic language. And 19th century Germany's language was like a language of philosophy. And now English. It is also objectively because we need now to speak like now we with you, Russians must speak English if we'd like to give our to share with our ideas with many peoples. It is good or bad for our native language. For example, Russian, not so good, of course, not so good, but it's reality. But I remember in Soviet time. In Soviet time, we had Russian language in the Soviet Union. And now also Russian language in Russia, there is a many nations, and the same in the United States. There is a many nations, there's many languages, but English is the main. Must be afraid because of globalization and its influence to culture? Yes, of course, but not so much. We must be pragmatic. We must understand that many literature, many sources in science, and so on and so on and so on in English language. And English language in global world starting to be the main language. You can remember that official language was in first part of 20th century, Esperanto. Do you remember?
Yeah.
Esperanto was created. Yes, and then people thought that they can creating artificial language which will be common for all of us. But this idea was broken. This idea was died. Why? Because language, very closely connected with our real life. It is like organism. It's developed every time. Look, how many new words in English language. In our language, many new words, terms with computerization and so on and so on and so on. That is why we must be care, but not worried a lot about globalization and its influence in culture. But we must care about our culture ourselves, about our languages and traditions and our beliefs, but we must compare our culture, compare with norms which must be established in global world and which must be common for all of us.
Well, I remember Esperanto. I remember studying Esperanto, and
Yeah.
thinking that this is such a simple language, you can learn it in 2 weeks. It has only 3 grammatical rules, and after that you can write down in your syllabus that you are bilingual.
Yeah.
But anyway, it didn't happen.
Yeah.
That is true. What is the difference, if any, between globalism and cosmopolitanism?
Like philosophers, you know very well that cosmopolitanism was created in ancient Greek. In ancient Greek and Kynikis, Diogenes, yeah,
Diogenes, yes.
Yeah, Diogenes, yes, was one of them. They said that we are citizens, not Athens, not only one city, but all the cosmos. We appreciate more our freedom, and that is why this thinking was starting and continuing to be in different centuries after that, and more and less, of course, till starting a real globalization. Because before the great geographical discoveries, people don't understand properly what kind of place where they live. They don't understand that this is a ball. They think this is it is like field, and they live, and that is why they said about cosmopolitanism, because the oikoumene Greek thought was like thought in oikoumene, the sphere where they live, and it is a grant which they can understand what's happened till these grants, and after that they this is a cosmos, and they said before great geographical discoveries about cosmopolitanism. When Nikolai Kuzansky and Nikolai Copernic changed our mind, and when Columbus and then Magellan proved showed us that we live in a ball, and global starting to be our whole, our life. And till nowadays, we can say, I say that it is only our home, only our planet, and very, very closely sphere of space, whereas the satellites around the Earth. That's all. Because if of course, if in a space a life the same exists, but I think it exists. It's my belief, but we don't know exactly from science point of view. We can't say for 100% that it exists. 99.99999 yes, but not 100 yes, till nowadays. And that is why now we think globally and global consciousness, global understanding, global mind hour is similar as ancient Greek says about cosmopolitanism. That is why if we will say that cosmopolitanism ideas, what kind of concept we put in this term, the same that in globalization, global mind, global understanding, global consciousness. Because if we will say cosmopolitanism in reality, we will put it to the reality, then it is all cosmos, all space. Where is the rule? Where is the flow of this? We don't know enough well. Physics say us something. That is why my point of view, my understanding that cosmopolitanism was come to the another steps, cosmopolitanism and global consciousness. It's a similar from my point of view.
Okay, now let's move again to the criticism of globalism. We all have heard about anti-globalist movement. What is the nature of this movement? Are these anti-globalist people really against globalization in general, or simply a certain, or they are simply against a certain kind of globalization? What do you think?
Anti-globalist.
Yes.
Yeah. From starting, I'd like to say that anti-globalism, it's a seriously movement. Yes. Why? Because it is a protest movement. But we must ask ourselves, what kind of against are they? They anti-globalism maybe can help us understand indirectly, thinking it is against of globalization. And some of them say the same, yes, against of globalization. But if we will understand enough well what is globalization, like natural historical processes, which starting many centuries ago, many hundreds years ago, and go harder and harder, and so on and so on, then we must say that anti-globalism is a movement which against of not good social society around the world. They against of such relationship when a few countries decide for others, when some companies receive a profit and don't care about people, a population of countries where they have their factories and so on and so on. And they against of garbage around the world, about the bad ecological problems, nuclear bombs against nuclear, and so on and so on. That is why we must say it is good movement. But in this moment we have some aspects not good when they destroy maybe stores, maybe put up cars and so on, and maybe beat something and so on and so on. But if we will say about anti-globalism 10 years ago, 20, in and they starting to be like it's a visible movement in 1999 and 20 years. And nowadays it is changing now, well, because after that we will see not only green movement before them, before this one was, and Greenpeace and so on and so on. They started more civilized, I think, more civilized. And another movement, it is alter globalism, the alternative of globalism. I think it's not correctly, because globalization from my point of view, it's like sunrise. It's objective processes. If you will say about alternative globalism, then you will say about globalization like a project of someone. It's a bad project. Let's create a good project, and so on and so on. It's not correctly. It's not good way for thinking. And in this way, we will not receive enough equipment and possibilities to change our life properly. It's like it is necessary. It is my shortly understanding of anti-globalism.
Okay, thank you, Professor. One of the terms that are used about globalization is glocalization, a hybrid of globalization and locality.
Yeah.
What is, in your view, the connection between globalization and localization?
Yeah, it's a good question, and it is easy for me to explain and to give answer for this question, because we talked about a local level of our life, a regional level of our life, and global level of our life. And all three, these levels represent in our everyday life, in our society, in your society, and all humanity. That is why when we are talking about globalization, we talk globalization. This is a process around the world of when creating the structures, relationship, and communication in global scale, in global level, in different parts of our of society, of our life. If we understand such globalization, but not like a project, maybe plan, week plan, and so on and so on, like, then we must understand that global processes influence of regional processes and also to the local processes. And if something wrong in global economy, maybe collapse like now. Maybe in financial, maybe crisis. It is, of course, we feeling in our personality life, in our my country, Russia, in my town, Moscow, in Philadelphia, New York, in Paris, and so on and so on. That is why when we are talking about global processes, we must keep in mind that we live on our not only global, not only region, but mostly in our small level, local level. That is why now we're talking about globalization. Global processes influence on local processes in our life, and local life also not only depends on global, and also I said that subjects influence of globalization. Of course, mostly my country more influence to global process than me myself, but I influence in my university, in my students in my country in the world, and the same in different other countries. These processes, when global processes influence in localization, local connected, and also influence not so visible like from global to local, from local to global, the same, also very important. I'd like to give you example, very small. If you imagine yourself, maybe a lake, not deep lake, and very quiet area, no wind, very quiet. It's very clear water, very clear water. And when wind starting more and more hard, more and more, wave in this lake starting more and more and more, and not deep, maybe 30, maybe 40 centimeters till the
Bottom.
yes, that's right. And there is small, pieces of earth starting up, and water starting not so clear, It's like globalization, the same. Before globalization, we lived in our local relationship and regional, that's all. And after globalization, we starting understand that our local life, our local processes starting to be some different. And they starting wake up such problems like languages, nationalism, and separation, and so on and so on. This is the reason why we have such many problems in different countries, like in Russia, Chechnya, in Spain, you can see Catalonia, and so on and so on. And this is a Brexit, similar, and United States now. Trump says that globalization, it's a we will close our grants to the and so on and so on. It is these problems in global and local and regional, of course. We not say it's regional, but this is it. You must understand not global, local, and regional the same. This is a process, we says, globalization.
Okay, thank you. I have couple more questions, and
Okay.
I have one question about the Club of Rome.
Oh yeah.
In 2018, we celebrated the 50th anniversary of the establishment of the Club of Rome.
Yeah.
And as you know, this is an international organization that describes itself as an organization that strives to make a difference to promote understanding of the global challenges facing humanity. So most recently, the Club of Rome issued a report about capitalism, short-termism, population, and the destruction of the planet. Could you please tell me what is your appraisal of this report?
Yeah, it's a famous report, as others the same. And I'd like to say that Club of Rome, it is very, very well-known and very important organization, which made a lot of for our understanding where we are living now, what's happening around us. The limits of growth was a report which was shook our mind, all planet, and the best book in the 20th century, in my mind, is in this sphere of globalization. I think this is human quality of Aurelio Pichei, first president of the Club of Rome. And about 40 reports they prepared, and most of them, many of them, it's a very, very important role played in our understanding this globalization. But you asked me about the last report of Club of Rome. This is very important to say that this is a come on, capitalism and short termism, population, and the destruction of the planet. This is a report of Club of Rome, but not to Club of Rome. This report was prepared by members of clubs. And when I read it, I was not so, maybe I was sad. Why?
You were disappointed?
They said about very important problems around us, but they said the same 50 years. 50 years. They only in this report they indicate the same problems, but more urgent, more dangerous than in previous time. That is why this report is important, and I appreciate very much the job was done in this. But here's only, they say, let's live better, let's live together, let's understand, and so on and so on. They say, please help me say it in English. I will say in Russia, you will understand me better, and explain, please, then what I'd like to say. В русском языке есть кот Леопольд, который говорил: ребята, давайте жить дружно, а не захочешь жить дружно и не будешь жить дружно, и ничего ты больше не сделаешь. Так вот, мне показалось, что этот доклад как раз из этого разряда, когда они в очередной раз говорят: ребята, давайте жить дружно.
Okay. In Russian culture, there is one character, a cat called Leopold, and his slogan is, guys, let's be friends and live together. Professor, you think that this last report of the Club of Rome says pretty much the same. Guys, let's all be friends, let's live together in peace. But these are simply words that do not bring any real practical results.
Yeah, and I'd like to add a few words. In the last year, in December of 2019, I was in Dubrovnik on the meeting of Club of Rome. I participated, and I was surprised. They say not so important question as they said when a president was Aurelio Pichè, Alexander King, and others. And I think that nowadays, Club of Rome, it's not so strong as the previously time. Of course, it is very good that they exist. It is very good they have prepared reports, but on such way, we cannot change our situation on the planet. That is why I say, yes, thank you, but we must looking for another way, not only thinking, but looking a way to the mind of person who make decision in a global level. And we must find, as Aurelio Pichè found it 50 years ago, such way was unusual. It's a new idea. And I think that the Club of Rome and the same Club of Budapest, Erwin Laszlo, I also have been sometimes and closely communicate with Erwin Laszlo and so on and so on. So, and this is good, but club, this one, another one, it's cannot change a lot of more than they done till nowadays.
Okay, so we are starting to get questions, but before we move on to the questions, let me just ask my last question. In your writings, you use the term post-globalization, and I find this term interesting. What exactly does it mean?
Post-globalization, this is a mix exists, but I don't think that this term has enough concept. Why? Because I'm not. I I don't like to have forecast. I'm scientist. I'm philosophers. I can guess maybe. Mm, I will say maybe yes, maybe no. How many percent will be this one or this one? Maybe situation. That is why if we will say what will happen in global processes in the future, in nearest future, not far future, in nearest future, globalization will start in more hard and hard. And at the same time, we talked with you about local processes. And in my last book, Global War, Clash of Interests, I investigate this situation. And in my understanding, national states will be starting more and more hard, not destroyed. They will not open their grants more than till nowadays, because if we will ask ourselves, planetary humanity is a system. Yes. Planetary system is governing? No. Regulation? A few. And another question, can we govern of social systems? Yes, of course. My university governed by my rector. My city governed by my mayor and his team. My country governed by president and main structures as United States and others different countries governing. And outside of nations, countries, no. European Union shows now us what's happened when in Italy tragedy, in France tragedy, they lose, they find a solution themselves mostly because this system may be governed a few, but regulated. Well regulated, but it's not enough to have deal to overcome the problem which we are facing. And that is why in global processes, we must looking for a such net situation, net system, when different nations, different countries will be like net system and govern it of this global, maybe, but maybe it's a question. And national states govern it. Better, less, it's nothing. It's okay, but we can't say about government. That is why post-globalization, globalization will not stop. Of course, it can stop if we will destroy our planet and our life with nuclear bomb. Of course, it will be stopped. Of course, destroyed, all of these. But if all countries will closely close around their grants, it's nothing change our understanding in globalization, because not only information connections, not only ecological situation with water and air will combine us, of course economy, of course politics, and so on will be more and more hard. And nowadays situation, unfortunately, we haven't time to talk about this. This is another topic, of course. But post-globalization, I think it is such situation which will be maybe maybe like no, not maybe it the same. Of course, global structure is connections, relations. It's the same. But what's happened after this coronavirus and from after destroyed of economy systems in the many countries, I think maybe we will not understand not well what will be happening. But that is why post-globalization is like a term which we must put in this term properly concept. But it's our task in the future, not only maybe our professors' task, but our students, maybe mostly than our tasks.
Thank you, Professor. We are having questions. Let me first address the question about the Club of Rome. So when you were saying, when you were talking about the last report of the Club of Rome, do you basically, were you basically saying that the Club of Rome has no solutions, has no practical solutions, only talk?
Please tell me, please, what kind of question. I'd like exactly understand what you'd like to ask me.
Well, let me, for the simplicity's sake, rephrase this question in Russian. Когда, Саша, ты говорил о римском клубе, ты говорил практически, что этот доклад только говорит о решениях, но конкретно ничего не меняет.
Указывает на проблемы.
Да,
Да.
только указывает на проблемы, но ничего не
yes, he's indicate to the problem, but he cannot change. Report cannot change, but report, unfortunately, not show us a way, new, different way, new ideas. What must we change in our investigation and in our activity in our life? What must we change in the mind, in consciousness of persons who make decisions in a global level, in a nation state? I returned again to human quality of our LPC. He said the main problem not in the economy, not in the politics, in our mind, because he said when we explain our ideas, our worried, dangers, what kind of dangers we are facing in global war, we saw that nobody was against. Everyone was agree and said, yes, of course, I can, I must, I can, and must, I will do myself, all myself. But, he said, when we finish our talking, when we go to our citizens, everything continue the same as before. This is the problem. This is the problem. Unfortunately, nowadays, the same situation. And Club of Rome and the last report also indicate the problem. It's good because it's a authority, it's a voice, of course. It's a good. But when, if not they, when and who will explain what we must do? This is a problem. This is not punishment of Club of Rome, of course. No. This is it. It's for myself. I can say for myself, we are doing what we can, but what is human human soul, human mind? This is a problem. Not for only the scientists who has deal with globalization, and for scientists who has deal with consciousness, soil, psychology, sociology, and so on and so on and so on. And our responsibility of scientists and philosophies, of course, more important than other common people. That is why I say such about Club of Rome, the last report.
Okay, got you. I think that also is you can connect this to your distinction between governance and regulation. One thing is to regulate a system, but the system basically develops on its own. And another thing is to govern the system. So you have some tools to actually, exhibit some kind of control over the system and make sure it moves in a certain direction. So your point was that on the national level, the systems are governed within the national states, while there is no such thing on the global level. And that's why the global system is not governed, but slightly regulated through different organizations.
Yeah.
And no matter what we think, no matter what we say the problems are, until and unless we create some kind of governance of the global system, the situation will not essentially change.
Yeah, I'd like to add a few. When someone talked about global governance, I think such person not enough well understand what is governing. Because if you imaginate yourself one country, not United States, not Russia, more smaller, for example, like maybe Poland, maybe Czech Republic, maybe Swiss. And remember, imagine, please, that in this country, they have only government, only ministry, ministry, cabinet of ministry, cabinet of ministry. Yes, that's it. Yeah. Without parliament, without president, without the law system, without common law system, without the police, of course, and money control, and so on and so on and so on. How can manage? How they can manage? That is why who spoke about global government don't understand enough well. There is this is a huge, very, very complicated system, more complicated than one country, United States, Russia, China. It's a small system if we will compare with humanity. And what kind of equipment, what kind of tools we must have, what kind of police and other structures we must have around the world. Because if we don't like to be a cat of Leopold, we must have a common law, not common law, global law, not international law. International law is we have, of course, between 2, 3, 5, maybe 50 countries law. It's international law, global law for all of us. But law, it's not only a text on the paper. Law, it's also it's prisons, court, prisons, it's the police, it's the law. Of course, without this one, only one court, only one text of the paper. It is okay, court Leopold. Let's live friendly. Let's live friendly. I don't like live friendly. Nothing for them. That is why I said, let's stop about global government. Let's stop. Because it's like it's a it's a zakulisa in Russia. It's за кулисами.
Well, what you are referring to is I don't know how to even describe it. It's called shadow government, and it's kind of very popular in Russia. This conspirological theory about the shadow government that is operating the grid. And usually, of course, this government is run by the Jews. So this is not good at all, and this has nothing to do with globalization. But I think what you are saying is that governance is much more complex than people tend to imagine. The world, the world executive branch would not be enough. You need judicial branch. You need other branches, you need common law, you need common economic system, etc., etc., etc. And just to establish a global governance in a week or two would be simply a utopia. I think that is the essence of what you are saying. Let me move on to another question. Why do nations under stress tend to pull away from the world instead of seeking help from other nations? Isn't the global spread of our pandemic, COVID-19, a prime example of the necessity of globalism? So it seems that, this pandemic should bring us together, but at the same time, it actually moves us apart from each other. Everyone wants to separate themselves from other nations.
I think both. This situation shows that we are like one family on the earth, that our planet, like one whole, it's from one side. From other side, we understand that on the planet, there are so many societies which stay on the different level of civilization development. We have enough development in civilization, from civilization point of view, if you are looking to the societies, enough countries like in Europe, for example, and others like enough many countries was not so appreciate so much human rights, for example. And we can see many examples in our humanity where we have not only barbarism and the savagery, unfortunately. And if you civilize man, and this is maybe savagery, please me. Savagery, yeah. Can you understand each other? I think it's very difficult, because you'd like it and he'd like it. He can eat maybe yourself, but you will eat maybe fruit, maybe not animals, because you're civilized. And if you look into our nowadays humanity, we have many different levels, and also level of civilized culture different. I can't compare cultures, because my dancing in Russia and dancing in Africa and dancing in America, in England, different. Which is better? I don't know. Each of them good. Song different very much. Which is better? I don't know. Each of them is very good. My language, it's very my native language is very closely for me than to Germany, so America, to England, English, the French maybe, and the same. But when we are talking about civilization, I appreciate yourself, and you please appreciate me. You're Americans, you're Germans, I'm Russian, you're Islamic, and maybe Christianity is the same in airport, international airport, in railway stations. We behave ourselves the same because of civilized level, but not in our different cultures. Yeah.
Can I interject another question? We have quite a lot of questions. What is your opinion about the tension between security and liberty? You know, on the one hand, people should have rights. On the other hand, you know, when things happen like pandemic, you need security, and other things. When terrorism happens, you need security. How do you how do you balance security and freedom? What are your thoughts about that?
Yeah, it's a problem. It's a big problem because nowadays, when we have very high level of computerization, and when we have so many cameras around around us on the streets and the stores and so on and so on and so on, and in this situation, we can ask ourselves, who is looking for us, who is control our behavior, and so on, and what kind of people, what kind of their nature of these people. And this is a problem I feeling myself mostly when I have been many times, more than 30 times in China. And the last time I was in December last year, I see how change in last maybe 3 years, it's the situation very much starting more and more harder, and more closely and more difficult. We can say something maybe writing if and maybe 10 years ago I writing my report to China and send them to organize committee to the conference, and they said it's okay and you're welcome. And now I must give them my text, and they say we will looking through this text and wait please a time, we need a time to look your text, and then you will say what's happened. It is not situation only in China, you know, in Moscow now so many cameras, you know, many.
By the way, Alexander, let me interrupt you because I have a question right about this topic.
Yeah, and I finished then. It's okay.
Yeah.
It's okay. Yes, I'm sorry, Professor, because the question is very important. Okay, I will shortly. Of course, this pandemic, it is a very big threat for humanity, and totalitarian systems more productive, more successes in such situation. Yes, that's right. Then democracy in Europe, we can see. And multiculturalism shows us that democracy is not enough well when clash different cultures and so on and so on. Where is the solution? I think maybe between freedom and strong following of rules and norms and so on and so on. But of course, for me, many questions which is open for me too. I'm not a man who has answers for all questions. I can only thinking and share with you my opinion. Thank you.
So here is the question about Russia. Right in this context, President Putin is described in the news to be an advocate of Ivan Ilyin, and Ivan Ilyin.
Ivan Ilyin, yes, philosopher, yes, famous Russian philosopher.
Yeah, Mr. Putin seems committed to pursue one of Ilyin's central concepts described as the identification and destruction of the enemies of the Russian culture. Since the early 90s, the changes, especially in Moscow and St. Petersburg, seem to have absorbed the culture of consumerism from the West. How do young Russians, students at your university, see themselves in today's world? As part of a global society or as distinctly different people threatened by global influences?
If I understand correctly, question, Ivan Ilyin is a famous Russian philosopher, said about especially different cultures, especially in Russian cultures. And as I know, Putin appreciate these philosophies and remember his ideas enough often. Yeah, that's right. Maybe not directly, indirectly, that is why. But please tell me shortly what do you think when you ask me about young generation student in my university, what kind of question?
Let me briefly rephrase it in Russian
Yeah.
for better understanding.
Yeah.
Саша, что твои студенты думают о себе, вот студенты твоего университета? Как они позиционируют себя в современном мире? Чувствуют ли они себя частью глобального общества, или они себя чувствуют особенными такими другими людьми, которым глобальное влияние сулят проблемы?
Да, это интересный вопрос. Sorry. It's an interesting
question. We are
question.
switching now back to English.
Yeah. Of course. Thank you for the explanation. Yeah, students are just very different from one to one. To one. And I'm professor of Faculty of Global Processes, whereas we're preparing specialists in two fields, in politics and economy, from global point of view, from global positions. That is why in our faculty we have there is about 500 students on this faculty, and mostly of them thinking, of course, globally. And they understand enough well what is globalization. They very easy separate globalization, global studies, global problems, globalism, global movement, and so on. Very easy. But at the same time, in Moscow State University, on the faculty maybe physics, chemics, and maybe students not so enough well understand what is globalization. And if you will let me speak with such student, some of them says, oh, this is a project of the United States. Oh, this is a project of Club of Rome, and maybe others. And so, some of them say, globalization, it's just a process, objective, and so on. It's different. But it is a student in Moscow, but I think it's a similar situation in other universities around Russia. But if we gathering of such point of views. Of course, I not have sociologist results. I not investigate, especially this situation. I can say maybe like first vice president of the Russian Philosophical Society, 33 years, you know, I've been in such position. I know enough well at education in philosophy in Russia. And I can say that Russian mentality more than other nations, maybe in my opinion, open to the global scale, to the humanity. It is our culture. Especially Chinese, my colleagues say me, you Russians, we are feeling that Chinese, says me, my colleagues. We are very closely in our mind. We are looking for our profit, for our culture, we are like a center, that's a point of center. But you and Russians are very open. And you, like philosophy knows, in Russian philosophy, we have especially directions like it's cosmopolitanism, it's a Russian cosmism. Russian cosmism. It's especially philosophical directions where philosophy is talking about all humanity. Vladimir Solovyov, a philosophist, famous Russian philosophist, Berdyaev, and so on and so on. There's a philosophists also in Russian. They're looking for all humanity, like it's Karl Jaspers, for example. That is why nowadays our students, I think it's different, but mostly of them, I think, not nationalism. Nationalism, it's not Russian tradition. Yes, of course, we have some aspects of in some people, yes, and in general, no.
Thank you, Professor. We probably have to wrap it up very soon, but I have a couple more questions. So could you please answer them basically in 30 seconds or 1 minute? So here is one question. Is there a connection between religious objections to global unity and nationalism? Let me rephrase it in Russian. Есть ли связь между религиозным отрицанием глобализма и национализмом?
I don't know what is rejection of globalism from religion. Yes.
Probably the author is talking about religious nationalism, like in Russia, for example, Orthodox Christianity is a national religion, and therefore it rejects globalism under the excuse that because it sees itself as the global force and rejects other religions. I think that was the salt of the question. Русская ортодоксия — это национальная религия, и поэтому она, естественно, противится глобализации, особенно на секулярной почве.
Unfortunately, in Russia, not only religion, you're right, it's not support very much global ideas, globalization. It's the Orthodox Church. It's okay. It's true, but it's a pity for me that not enough well care about global processes and global tendencies from government of Russian government. It is more important, I think, because from my point of view, religion and our government, it's very closely communicate, more closely, because in our constitution, separate civil society, the civil life, and religion. But unfortunately, in reality, it's from my point of view, my position, it is not following in this law. And globalization from such position, of course, not supported ideas, not enough well supported ideas. But if we have in the main university global processes faculty, it is another side of this problem. And also we have some journals, for example, like Age of Globalization journal. I'm chief and editor of this journal, and so on. It is both, but it's very closely connect religion and globalization. Talking about religion, it is another very important question.
Yeah.
We will maybe continue. We will talked with you a lot of and writing some together articles, and maybe we will continue sometimes.
All right, thank you, Professor. I think we have to wrap it up. We have more questions coming, but we cannot really
Very
answer
good.
all of them because we are over time. Maybe Professor could answer them personally on social media, and I think we have to wrap it up.
May I suggest you, Professor, may I suggest you to take this question, all of this question, and maybe we will discover it, maybe we'll investigate this question, and maybe we will give writing answers, and we'll publish maybe articles, and then give our who listening us, give them our paper. Maybe like articles, maybe.
Yeah, that is a good idea. We
Like
will keep the question. I will send them to you.
Yeah, why not?
Excellent. I want to thank both of you very much for this very, very interesting discussion. I think it has showed to all of us how complicated the idea of globalization really is, how you can't really put a beginning date on it, how it really goes all the way back to the first tribes dealing with their neighbors. The equivalent of anti-globalization always, I think, has been, sure, we'll trade with you as long as we benefit more. You know, that's really the root of anti-globalization is right there with we want to come out on top. And a lot of the anti-globalization that we see in the world, I think, comes from that. So this was a fantastic presentation. I'm really very, very grateful.
Thank you.
For you to participate in this, and perhaps we will be able to do it again sometime. So I think that pretty much wraps it up. Thank you, Mikhail, for coordinating all this. Thank you again, Professor Chumakov, Alexander, for doing this for us and joining us from Moscow, where it is warmer than large portions of the United States today. And global warming is indeed a nice global issue for us to close on, you might say, right there. And I want to thank our audience for joining us today, and we look forward to seeing you all actually next week with a presentation on John Bosch, and then a week after that on a presentation again on globalization. So thank you, everyone, and have a good evening, and we look forward to seeing you again.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye.